Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 6 here in multimedia journalism. Dr. Shermack here. I hope everyone is having a fantastic week, and we are headed towards the midterm here in class, so that's pretty exciting as well. We're switching gears a little bit from where we've been, but not really. And let me explain what I mean by that here today as we go through class. Let's see what's on the big show for today. I can advance my slide here. Big show for today. I'm going to give you a week 6 overview so you have a rough idea of where we're headed today. Um, Today's main dish is going to be social media and journalism, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Oh, I have an Oxford comma in there. That's not the way to go. I got to take that out. No Oxford commas in AP style. Uh, so we'll talk briefly about that. This won't be as long as some of the other lectures because you have some decent amount of reading to do this week, but it's really good reading. I think it's some of the two of the best chapters from the textbook. We'll get into that. So we'll take a look ahead and we'll talk about what you need to do for this week. So our week 6 overview, like I said, we are changing gears a little bit. But there is a lot of relation, even though we're changing gears, there's a lot of relation to what we've already done in class, and particularly what you've just done with the photo assignment for week 5 that you have turned in for week 5. So we cannot, well, let me put it this way. Journalism requires reach. And when we talk about reach in journalism or even social media, the simple way to put that is how many people is our work getting to? That's a bad sentence. Let me try that again. How many people are consuming our work? How many people are consuming the news content that we create? And that has different measurements. It could be measured in, maybe page views on a website. It could be measured in the number of followers you have on TikTok or Facebook or Instagram, of course. So we're thinking about reach because ultimately what we want to do is reach our audience, right? And the way that we do that is we, look at what the audience might be interested in, understand our reporting area, which we've talked about and we've defined as this class. We're using the Questonians model for this, meaning that our primary audience is the Questa student and the Questa community and surrounding community. So part of reaching your audience is making sure that you're producing content that they will be interested in consuming. That's number one. But you have to also put into place the mechanism for yourself to reach that audience. And today's top mechanism for doing that is social media. There is no better way to reach audiences than having thorough and a thorough presence on social media, an investment in social media, and a plan of action with social media. So we talk about social media. It is the way that journalism gets to our audience and gets to the modern day audience, I should say. Websites are great. We need a website. It's kind of our base, if you will, for our work. But we're engaging with more of our audience through social media than we are our website. If you take a look at the most viewed pages on a news website, the homepage might not even be in the top 10 most viewed pages. And you think, well, wait, how did they get to a story if they didn't go to the homepage? The answer is simple. They accessed it through social media. They clicked on a link on Facebook. They clicked on a link on LinkedIn, name any social media site. So they're going directly to the stories. They're not going to the homepage anymore. The homepage is no longer the front door to the news. The social media platforms and the social media accounts maintained by news organizations, that's the front door. So guess what? We need to be there. So when you have multimedia content, you need to make sure it's on social media. That's the best way to reach your audience. We all know that photos and video play really well on social media, and that's our primary focus in this class, or parts of our primary focus are those multimedia elements. One of the things you need to do to be successful on social media is actually have a presence. I hear journalism students all the time who say, I don't have a Facebook account. I don't use Facebook. I don't have an Instagram account. I don't have an X account, whatever it may be. You need to change your thinking. You need to go where your audience is. And you might not have a bunch of followers on one platform versus another, but you yourself can't be resistant to social media. Otherwise, you won't have an audience. And if you don't have an audience to consume your journalism, there's really no point in doing journalism. It is a service to the public for the public. You have to reach the public. So building your social media presence, that's something that is discussed at length in our readings today from Adornato. And it's really going to be important for you to consume and digest that chapter because it's really excellent and has a lot of good tips on building your social media presence. But if you're serious about pursuing journalism or a journalism adjacent career, you need to have a social media presence, and it should start right now. The work you're doing in this class should be something you feature on that, because I will tell you, people who are looking at you for internships, looking at you for jobs, maybe even scholarships or college admissions, they're going to be looking for, hey, what has this person done? And your social media sort of becomes this de facto portfolio for you. So start developing that now. And we're going to learn a lot about structuring that and thinking about that this week. Social media as a tool is not only it has become not only a way to distribute information, it has also become a way to create stories. So, when you're using, I think a really good example is a platform like TikTok. TikTok has a lot of built-in editing tools, text, so on and so forth, where you can create really excellent journalistic stories using that platform. And, there's an entire list of the other tools we've talked about for this class. And they all have some linkage to social media. There are, you can easily move items from those apps over to social media in a jiffy. So social media as a development tool is really powerful, in addition to its power for reaching your audience. So, any of the work we do in this class, including the photo story that you just did, the way it gets to our audience is through social media. And that's why we're talking about it here in week 6. So we all know that there is a lot of good to social media. There's a lot of bad to social media. There's a lot of ugly to social media. Um, so I want to walk through that today and put a particular journalistic lens on it to think about social media from a journalistic standpoint. What do we talk about with social media and journalism when we're thinking about the good, the bad, and the ugly? Let's start with the good. And don't worry, we're going to return to a positive perspective once we get through the bad and ugly as well. But let's start with positive and let's get to the bad, ugly, and then how do we work with this? So the big question I think we're trying to answer today, and we're always trying to answer in journalism, is how has social media affected journalists and journalism? How do we use social media as journalists and in journalism? And I'll be very honest, the book is still being written on that. The rules are still being made. There's always something new. It's one of those things I always tell people, it's hard to find a textbook for a lot of the classes that I teach because the answers are always changing. You are part of a generation right now, and this doesn't have to do with age, it has to do with your use of technology. You're part of a generation right now that's setting the table, setting the tone, setting the stage for how journalism is going to be how social media is going to be sort of normalized in journalism. So you're playing a huge role in this. It's really important. And so part of what we do in this class is, yes, we talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, but we also keep in mind that there needs to be some openings. There needs to be some fluidity. I don't even know if that's a word. I hope it is. There needs to be some fluidity to what we do. We need to be open for change. We need to be open to adjustments. So that's really important to keep in mind. All right. So let's talk about the good. And as I already mentioned a few moments ago, social media allows our journalism and our work to be spread more easily. All right. It allows us to push this out to many, many people across the country, across the world. That's one of the best parts about social media. We don't have to rely on someone just coming to a website, or in the example of a newspaper, picking up a paper copy of the newspaper, or turning on a television or turning on a radio, whatever it may be. We have people who are going to follow us on a platform, and they're going to be sent that information directly. And that's a really powerful thing if you think about it, right? Um, you have what's called participatory journalism. Journalism is a participation sport. I think you know that as budding journalists, or no, I'm not even calling you budding journalists. I'm calling you journalists. But the participatory part is the audience taking part in that. And I know our textbook, in some of the first chapters we've read in the Adornato textbook, has talked about the importance of participation from our audience. They're sending in news tips. They're sending in videos and photos that we can then turn around and use as part of our content. And all of a sudden, the reporting becomes very, very powerful. So that's a great element to it. With social media, it's much easier to network. You can follow people back when they follow you. You can reach out to people on social media. Hey, can I interview you on this topic? I saw that you posted about X. I want to talk to you about X. Meaning X, the variable, not the platform. Um, there's a lot of opportunities to connect with people. And one of the things, and this is the subject of one of your chapters this week, using social media as a news gathering tool, finding sources, like I just mentioned, verifying information is another way that we can use this in journalism. So it's this very valuable tool. I think you'll see as we talk through today, there's a lot more good than there is bad and ugly. I really believe that. I know some of the nastier sides of social media are very well publicized, and there's no doubt that it has changed our world and made us rethink how we operate in sort of this information age. But I do think there's more good to it in journalism than the bad and ugly. One of the best things about it is the audience interaction. Before in an age of more print and more basic broadcast, there weren't a lot of ways for your audience to interact with you. They could write letters to the editor, they could write a letter to the station manager or producer, maybe directly to the, on-air television reporters, so on and so forth, call into a radio station. But now there's so many ways that we can reach journalists as audience members, and vice versa, right? You can communicate. There's a reciprocal opportunity to communicate with your audience. And that's new. That's something that really wasn't around when you had this sort of basic mass communication model um, that existed for so long in our legacy or traditional journalism. We talk a lot about this in Journalism 200, Intro to Mass Comm. If that's something you're interested in taking, please do. It's offered every semester and coming soon to the summer as well. Promotion of content. We talk about pushing out information. You can double down, triple down. You can really say, hey, I wrote this article last week, check it out, it's getting a lot of comments. Or, hey, remember that thing that happened this afternoon? I wrote an article about it 2 years ago. Here's that article again. It's an opportunity to, in a very timely and, if needed, urgent way, push out content that you're producing in the moment, or maybe that you've already produced. So it's wonderful for promotion. And then, of course, the big topic that we're talking about this week with the reading is building your personal brand. The title of our chapter is, Who Do You Want to Be? Do you want to be the expert on Dungeons and Dragons? I don't know. Do you want to be a sports writer? Do you want to be a business reporter? I saw there's a growing beat now about childcare. Do you want to be a childcare reporter? That sounds like a really important and fascinating beat. Define yourself. You have the freedom and the power to do that. That's a kind of a cool opportunity. Don't let the market define you, define yourself. And if you branch off and write other stories from time to time on different topics, that's okay. That's fine. You're going to do that as a journalist. You probably should do that as a journalist, but take the opportunity to make it known who you want to be and what your brand is. And I'll leave most of the discussion of that to our text reading this week because it's really excellent. So we got the good, right? We got the good down. Let's talk about the bad. All right, the bad. Bad. We're using this kind of cliche, good, bad, ugly sort of framework, but I don't want to make the bad sound really bad. I would say maybe a better way to look at this category might be the more challenging. Um, Social media has brought about additional job demands for journalists. You're being asked to do more than you have before. And I think sometimes we think about technology and we make the mistake of thinking, well, this has made my life completely easier. Maybe in some respects, but sometimes we don't think about what was left behind, right? Or what's been added. And there's been a lot that's been added to journalists' jobs. I did a study in 2015, and it was published in the journal Digital Journalism in 2016. And the study looked at the ways that newspaper sports beat reporters. So a sports beat reporter is a reporter that covers a sports team through and through, every game, every action, every transaction, you name it. And when they're covering every game, this particular group of beat reporters was feeling a lot of pressure to make posts, to post all the time. And I looked specifically at Twitter. And in the literature review for that journal article, there were other articles and studies that were being done saying that at the time when there was this shift in newspaper writing from, just going to a game, I don't want to say just, but going to a game, writing a story, writing up your story on deadline, turning it in, going the next day, doing the same thing all over again. There was a shift from that to keeping that game story that you had to write, but then adding on top of it the constant interactions and postings that you needed to do on social media. Journalists felt overwhelmed. And I think in some ways that's still happening. How do I manage all that? Not only do I have to learn a new technology, especially when there's new platforms coming up, so on and so forth, but I also have to meet the expectations of my audience as a leader on a topic. If you're a beat writer, whether it's sports or healthcare or finances, you're viewed as an expert on the topic. So when something happens, big news in that field, there's an expectation that you're going to post about it or you're going to write about it. So the expectations are raised when that content is expected. Some journalists have said they don't know how to escape. They don't know how to set down their phones. They feel like they're going to fall behind if news breaks and they're off the grid, so to speak, or they're shutting it down. I think we have to normalize shutting it down. I'll talk about that a little bit more later, but normalize limits because people are human and you can't expect them to always be engaged. But journalists are feeling that pressure. And then it's just sort of the maintenance of keeping up with your platforms. If you're on a number of different platforms, there's a lot of time dedicated just to keeping those up, right? And, responding to questions, adding posts, following people, unfollowing people, so on and so forth. And a lot of that comes from unfortunate audience interaction, right? Where maybe you don't get any audience interaction. That's always kind of frustrating. You make a post, no one's liking it, maybe few people are following you. Um, maybe you get some bad feedback. Um, I'll get into this a little bit more when I talk about the ugly part of social media. You could probably guess where I'm going with that. Um, Social media also brought to journalism more competition, right? You don't have to go to journalism school and work for a news outlet to call yourself a reporter anymore. You can start your own blog. You can start your own social media account, maybe just report on social media. So now this space is becoming crowded where journalists once dominated. And it's a little bit hard to get used to for a lot of journalists. And sometimes the people, and I'll talk more about this with the ugly as well, sometimes the people that are now in that conversation don't have the best intentions. Maybe they're there just to stir the pot, or maybe at worst, they're there to mislead, misinform. There's a lot of that out there as well. Advancements do come with downsides. That's always been the case. And you name just about any technological advancement in human history, and there's not a single one that has been entirely good, right? There's been a couple things that have gone sideways here and there at least. And social media in relation to journalism is no different. Let's talk about the ugly. And I alluded to both of these points. And by no means is this a comprehensive list. of the ugly. But I think these are the two to me that rise to the top when it comes to journalism. The number one is this, of course, thing, fake news. I don't like using that phrase. I rarely use that phrase because I think it's become overused, politicized, and sort of meaningless because there is actual fake news, news that is false. And it's very, very disturbing. It's very damaging. And what you have is social media has become the first place for this fake news, this misinformation, this disinformation to be spread. Understand the difference. Misinformation typically is defined as information that is mistaken. And it could be a very innocent mistake. It could be a mistake that, sort of, you kind of get a telephone game situation where someone heard something, and as that progresses through the channels, it gets fudged a little bit and screwed up a little bit. That's misinformation. The more nefarious one is disinformation. Disinformation is purposely meant to mislead, confuse, cause chaos, so on and so forth. And we see that a bunch during election season. That's kind of a prime time for us for that. And the issue and the relationship that this has to social media is the primary conduit for misinformation and disinformation. And I will tell you unequivocally, and this gets confused a lot and misstated a lot. I want to make very clear the vast majority of misinformation and disinformation is not coming from journalists. I'll say it again. The vast majority of misinformation and disinformation is not coming from journalists, but because journalists are out there pumping information into the ether, they are often lumped in with bad actors, um, ill-intentioned people who are spreading information. It's not fair. And it's one of the ugliest parts of social media. So journalists are constantly in a battle for their reputation. They're constantly fighting for who they are and what they do, defending their work because they get thrown in with a lot of the bad actors. It's unfortunate, but it is reality, and it's something you should know about. So that's the ugly side of this false news. Of course, there's a lot of ugly audience interactions that occur on social media as well. My dissertation was on the way that television meteorologists, your weather forecasters, television meteorologists, the way that they use social media. I explored what that was like for them, their personal experiences with it, and the stories I heard were horrific. The acts of incivility on social media from followers, from viewers, the way they're treated, and this spreads all over to every different arm of journalism. Um, Women are treated particularly poorly. That's what I found in my research. Men get it too, of course. Everyone gets it. Um, and it's a really unfortunate, a really truly ugly part of this. Um, so the attacks, there's threats, comments on appearance, all these sorts of things. So this is when things get ugly. And I think it proves even more that there needs to be limitations, barriers, protections that people put up between them and this ugliness that can occur on social media. Um, there's been journalists who I don't blame at all who have said, I'm leaving a particular platform behind because it's too nasty. And I get that. You have to protect yourself at the end of the day. You're the only one you've got. So I understand that. But that's kind of the ugly side for a lot of journalists. So we have this kind of broad overview of good, bad, ugly. What can we do? What can we do as journalists who are learning the craft, journalists who are trying to break into the industry? What are some things we can keep in mind? Because I said I want to start with the good. I want to end with the good, and what I think is good is ending with some solutions and ideas that you can take away and apply to situations down the road. So, what can we do? I think first and foremost is take control of your social media. What does that mean? It can mean a lot of different things. Maybe you want to limit yourself to just a couple of platforms. Right now, for example, the Questonian, is on 6 different platforms, 7 different platforms. That's a lot, but we're trying to reach our audience. Maybe we change that down the road. I don't know. But you have to think about that for yourself. If you say, look, I want to reach as much audience as I can, but I don't like X or I don't like Instagram, whatever, that's okay to an extent, but you want to make sure you're on some things at least to reach your audience. So there's a give and take there. Protect yourself, but also reach your audience. It's tough. It's easy. It's not easy to navigate this. Having said that, no matter how many social media platforms you're on, create your own brand. If you want to cover a certain topic, retweet or repost stories about that topic. Start writing your own stories about that topic. Send photographs out about that topic. Make yourself known as an expert on whatever topic you're interested in or subject that you're interested in. You have that power to sort of steer the narrative about yourself. And don't forget that. And I think one of the best pieces of advice I can give you is set your limits. You know, say, look, I'm not going to send out any social media between 10 p.m. and 10 a.m. unless something huge happens, in my field or in my area of study or in my subject expertise. I'm going to put my phone down and take myself out of this social media world for a little while. I still think that's possible for a journalist. There will be times, think about if you're a war reporter or a political reporter, there's going to be news that breaks, and you will, as part of your task for being, part of what you are um, tasked with doing as a journalist, you're going to need to have that moment, right? You're going to need to have that moment where you interact and where you come in a breaking news situation. So, but that said, most days you're going to have an opportunity to set a limit, set a boundary, and I highly recommend that. Make sure you're using social media for the good. Some of this is just ignoring the bad and the ugly, right? Um, so take advantage of the good stuff there. Excellent tool for reaching out. It's an excellent tool for researching stories, finding sources, verifying information. Take advantage of that. Um, as I mentioned earlier, it's a really powerful tool for those of us, and you're in this class for a reason, um, interested in multimedia, right? That's really important. So make sure that, you know, you realize the good in social media and take full advantage of that good. That's going to make your overall experience much more enriching. And it's going to make you feel a little better when you do run into some of that bad and even some of that ugly. If you have any questions, as always, please don't hesitate to reach out via email. I'm always happy to discuss things with you. There will be a discussion board this week about these very topics that I just mentioned. It's called Social Media, Good, Bad, Ugly. Get some of your thoughts on it. I'd love to hear some of your own as far as good, bad, ugly. And that's kind of what the discussion board is all about. So there'll be an opportunity to kind of talk about these issues for journalists. Your task for this week, you want to read chapter 3 from Adornado, which is called Your Social Media Brand, Who Do You Want to Be? So very much on topic, what we just talked about here with the lecture. And also chapter 4, Social News Gathering, using social media to do your reporting. That's what news gathering is. I mentioned the discussion already. Make sure to do that. We will have a quiz as well, as usual, over the readings, lecture, and current events. And then I'm gonna encourage you to get a start on our next assignment, which is called Follow a Journalist. And very simply, this assignment asks you to follow a specific journalist, not a news outlet, but a specific journalist on social media on a specific platform or multiple platforms, and monitor how they use those platforms. And then you're going to report back to us um, in kind of a discussion board style entity and share with us what you found. So we can all get a look and look at some examples of how journalists are using social media. It's really the best way to learn is look at what journalists are doing. So I talk about good journalists read good journalism, good journalism social media practitioners look at good social media journalism. I know that's a mouthful. So monitor, observe, take notes, critique, all that good stuff. That'll be part of this assignment. All right. So that is our video lecture for week 6. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for interacting. I really appreciate it and watching. As always, if you have questions, reach out on Canvas or email, and I will be in touch with you. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great week 6.